If the UK is not safe within the next 5 years, this country is done. The Islamic Republic has been funding through Qatari funds, you're hijacking your institutions. I was outside debating with students, and they are all radicalized. They are pro-Islamic Republic, pro-Hamas. How has this happened? This has happened like Qatari funded institutions that indoctrinate your children. These same children are going to be decision makers in 10, 20, 30 years' time. And they're going to literally hand your country to the Islamists.
Iran has seized control of the world's most important shipping lane for global oil supplies. The regime claims it will set on fire any ships passing through the Strait of Hormuz. The Islamic dictatorship has pursued a strategy of unpredictable strikes to grind down global morale and military capability in its war with the US and Israel. It now wants to pursue economic chaos. For many Iranians who have lived under the Ayatollahs, the recklessness and viciousness of this regime will be no surprise. Many celebrated when Khamenei was killed. Here to discuss the reaction in the country and the state of the war is Younes Sadaghiani. Younes, thank you so much for joining us again. Yesterday, you posted a video and you were slamming the supporters of the regime. You said they were getting beaten like a dog. And I got the sense watching that this is personal for you, isn't it, this war on the regime?
Yeah, so basically for the last 47 years, the Islamic Republic was spending all of Iran's money on ballistic missiles, like on nuclear facilities. Iranian people don't have food, water, gas. And now that after 47 years, stealing people's money, spending it on ballistic missiles and proxies, they're getting beaten so embarrassingly. Like I was expecting more for them from them, to be honest, because the fact that you're spending all of people's money on that one thing that you're supposed to be good at, then all of a sudden, America and Israel expose you. And I've been trying to tell this to people for many, many years. The Islamic Republic is a paper tiger. They pretend to be tough, but they're at their core extremely incompetent. As Marco Rubio puts it, they are lunatics. They are Islamic extremist lunatics that have managed to take charge of the country. And you see the result after 47 years.
I mean, they do have some strengths. I mean, some of their strategy here has been to do unpredictable missile strikes, like the one on Cyprus, like some of the ones that have disrupted the tourism to Dubai. A lot of the Gulf countries are vulnerable in terms of their water supply, which could be struck. There are fears that Iran will strike. Someone who's had to, knows this regime up close and personal for his entire life, what's the type of people that we're dealing with here? Are they the type of people that would care about taking away water from people?
No, they do not care. And I've said this before. The Islamic Republic is a type of regime that would nuke their own country just to stay in power. But now the hand is revealed because their capabilities, their missile capabilities, and also their nuclear and also their proxies have been decimated by Israel and America. And obviously the Ayatollah is killed, so that has caused a fraction within the regime because every time they pick a new Ayatollah within a few hours, the replacement is dead. And that's the same with every single IRGC member. As soon as they pick a replacement, Israel takes them out. So they are in panic mode. I saw a video yesterday that they were shooting at people from there that they were chanting death to Khamenei and long live the Shah and thank you Netanyahu and Trump. They were shooting people in the balcony that were chanting. Like that's how desperate this regime is. When it comes to it, they're incompetent. So they get beat by the big boys. They get beat by Israel and America. All they can do is to kill innocent Iranian civilians. And that's what all they've been doing for the last 47 years. So the Islamic Republic are just an embarrassment.
A lot of Donald Trump's rationale for going in the first place was about the brutality of the regime and the way that they treated those protesters in January, killing potentially up to 30,000, according to human rights groups' estimates. But it seems as though since that happened, he started talking a lot less about regime change. And Pete Hegseth gave a press conference earlier today, and he said that he has total control of Iran's skies, its waterways. But, however, he estimates that Iran will continue to try to attack, which leaves some room in my mind for the idea that maybe their aim here is just to weaken Iran to the point of impotence rather than actually regime change. What's your read?
Well, I hope that's not the aim. But at the same time, I understand Donald Trump and Marco Rubio not wanting to reveal their hands. Because, for example, if they come out and say, oh, we want Shah Reza in charge, then he will become a target all of a sudden. People will try to assassinate him or people will try to discredit him. So I think what Donald Trump and Marco Rubio are doing very cleverly, that they're keeping their options open. They're not saying we're going to endorse Shah, but at the same time, we're not going to say we're against them. So it's keeping everyone in limbo. It keeps everyone guessing. Just the same as they said for the last month, oh, we're going to negotiate with Iran. And everyone was thinking, how can you negotiate with terrorist regime? And then we woke up to the news that Khamenei is dead. So I think Donald Trump is very good at being unpredictable. My read on the situation is that, look, what happened in Iraq, and this is what we're going to talk about, and I think it's very important for people to understand because, I see a lot of people speaking about the Iraq and Afghanistan experience and how much of the failure that was, and they are right, it was a failure. But then America made a strategic mistake in invading a country that wasn't asking for it and then trying to impose democracy on them. You don't need to invade Afghanistan just to kill Osama bin Laden. You don't need to invade Iraq just to kill Saddam Hussein. And they also didn't have a long-term strategy. And also, let's not forget that people in those countries weren't protesting. They weren't asking for this. But the false comparison that people make is that, oh, Iran could be the next Iraq or Afghanistan, which is not true because we used to have a democracy in the past. We used to have democracy before 1979. As a matter of fact, the first Bill of Human Rights was signed by Cyrus the Great 2,500 years ago. So we don't have any imported values when it comes to democracy. Democracy began in ancient Persia. And this is what people don't realize. So people are asking for it. The problem, the mistake that the Bush administration made in Iraq was that not only they took out Saddam, they took out everyone. They fired all the police officers, they fired the firefighters, they fired the ministers, and then they tried to control the system that they did not truly understand. So I think what Trump is doing is thinking, well, I can't just get rid of everyone. There's people running that country. There's administrative duty, people that are in charge of the day-to-day activities. So I cannot get rid of all of them. So I might need to keep some of these people in their positions, whether it's the head of the artificial military, the conventional military, or maybe a few others, maybe even a few IRGC members, the good one, which I don't think there is a good one. But Trump is trying to be very strategic about this. He's trying to keep some sort of order in place to stop it from becoming absolute chaos. Because if you take out everyone, if you take out all the infrastructure and the people behind those infrastructures, we might have a situation like Iraq. But at the same time, I really doubt that Trump will pick a replacement from his side.
I mean, it sounds that that's probably a more pragmatic way of doing things. There have been reports that the CIA does have an idea of the type of people that maybe they would prefer to take power. He does seem to be quite tepid on Reza Pahlavi. I mean, you don't see Reza anywhere in the British media. He does talk to Fox News and some other American outlets. What's your read, sort of what's going on with him?
Look, I support shots that there is a Pahlavi, and I always have, right? And however, my criticism towards him in the past was that he's a bit, timid and sometimes he's a bit soft. And that's exactly what Donald Trump said. He said he's a nice guy, and if you read between the lines, well, maybe he's not assertive enough to take charge of that country. And to some extent, maybe I agree with him. But at this moment in time, we don't have anybody else. Okay? So he's a uniting figure that everyone needs to unite around from every single demographic for us to have a peaceful transition. Because otherwise, we risk being separated, or what happened to Yugoslavia, being separated into 5 or 6 different states. There's a risk of that happening in Iran, and we do not want that to happen. Hence why it's important to unite around the common figure, which is Shah Reza Pahlavi, which is a known figure, which used to be the son of the king, and people are calling his name. But at the same time, I do understand the worries that Donald Trump has. The guy has been away for 47 years. He doesn't know what modern Iran is like. He doesn't really have any people inside. Well, maybe he does. Maybe in terms of temperament and character, he's not strong and assertive enough in order to lead the country. So I understand the concerns. But at the same time, I would advise against picking someone from inside the regime, because I think that if you are part of that regime, there is something wrong with you. No person with a conscience can work in the Islamic Republic and can thrive in the Islamic Republic. Every single kind of person, educated person I know with a good heart, has left that country because they realize after a while that you cannot simply work with good conscience in the Islamic Republic. I think that Reza Shah should be the leader of the transitional because he's a known character. He should lead the transition for us to have a referendum in maybe 2 or 3 years' time, and then after that we can elect someone that is chosen by the
Yeah,
people.
you said a little bit earlier that the regime would rather nuke the country to stay in power than let it go. Does that mean you think that
Right.
eventually the US or Israel would have to put boots on the ground in order to kind of clear them out?
Well, at this moment in time, they're doing very well aerial. So the aerial strikes they've done have been absolutely devastating to the Islamic Republic. Not only they took out Khomeini, they took out major IRGC commanders, they took out major military bases, they took out nuclear sites, and that has been devastating. So at this moment in time, no. And Donald Trump said that the strongest wave of attacks are still on the way. Like, this is not the strongest wave of attacks yet. However, that being said, I think that ideally we don't want boots on the ground, but there needs to be, maybe from a strategic point of view, from a geopolitical point of view, there needs to be limited boots on the ground just to manage the transition. Because you don't know how many of the people in the army are going to defect. There might still be IRGC supporters in that country that might want to kill Shah Reza Pahlavi and his supporters. So you might need some sort of American and Israeli oversight for 2 or 3 years, just to make sure that transition happens smoothly. I think, realistically speaking, there will be limited boots on the ground, but not for the next month or so. I think America is going to continue its aerial strikes for the next month. Hopefully, we can hope for the best outcome.
What started the protests off, was the catalyst for the protests earlier this year, was the fact that so much food had become so expensive under runaway inflation in Iran. There's already a water crisis. The reservoirs around Tehran are at less than 10% of their capacity, and there's reports of starvation in some of the outer provinces. Now, that obviously makes Iran weaker in the face of the US and Israel, but with a regime in charge that probably doesn't care much about the lives of their citizens, how much pressure do you, because you are an Iranian, you care about the country, you want the regime to be finished for the welfare of the people there, but how much pressure would you be okay with Israel and the US applying to the people of your country who would ultimately suffer?
Well, look, this is the analogy I use. The analogy of the boiling frog. You put the frog in hot water and you increase the temperature 1 degree at a time until the water starts boiling and then the frog dies. And that's the situation we have in Iran. The water has been getting closer and closer to boiling point for the last 47 years. And I think that Iranian people would have suffered and have been suffering for the last 47 years. It's only a matter of time they starve anyway. They are starving now. So I think sometimes that you need to take certain actions that are with high risk, but you need to do them in order to suppress the current evil. So what I say to those people is like, yes, there might be some temporary growth things. Of course, war could be tragic sometimes. I just do not think that the USA and Israel are targeting innocent civilians. And I don't think their objective is to starve Iranians. Their objective is to free Iranians and from this cancerous cell that has been the Islamic Republic. And as I said, look, for the last 47 years, Iranians have been getting poorer and poorer to the point we don't have water, gas, and electricity. And all that money was spent on ballistic missiles that even the money they spent on ballistic missiles, they couldn't use them properly because they are just incompetent. So imagine another 2 years of this regime, another 3 years of this regime. We're almost reaching that point anyway, but in this excruciating, slow-moving pain, right? Maybe sometimes we need to take the fast hit, fast route. Yes, there might be some growth pains, but fundamentally you'll be in a better place in a few months.
Last time we spoke, you were willing the UK government to prescribe the IRGC. It still hasn't happened. We then saw that there were pro-regime supporters on the streets of London shouting Allahu Akbar with flags of Khamenei's face. We're waiting to see whether that's going to continue to grow as Britain now comes into the war. How have you experienced the pro-regime people in London? And I know that you've had your run-ins with people linked to the regime. You've been intimidated. You've had them spread rumours about you. How are you experiencing them at the moment?
Well, this is the tactic that the Islamic Republic uses to cause fear, but fear not, because I know not just myself, many of my friends that have been targeted physically, online cyberbullies, and try to destroy people's reputation. But this is the tactic that they use. We call them a paper tiger for a reason. They've been in power by causing fear and intimidation online, okay, and in person. So fear not. This is the last breaths of this totalitarian regime, and I really salute Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu for doing what they've done. And honestly, shame on Keir Starmer because he, as Donald Trump said, he's not a Churchill figure, and I 100% agree with him. Keir Starmer is not a leader, and one of the reasons this country will go down is because of people like Keir Starmer, because they have no backbone. They pander to the Islamists. All of Europe has considered the IRGC as a terrorist organ, but the UK hasn't, and I wonder why. Like even European countries have designated the IRGC as a terrorist organization, but the UK hasn't. As a matter of fact, the new Ayatollah, the son of Ali Khamenei, Mujtaba Khamenei, was treated in the UK for many months for impotency. So can you imagine these Ayatollahs, these IRGC related people, they come to the UK to get medical treatments, and this country opens, welcomes them with open arms. I heard another report that, IRGC members have properties in Bishop's Avenue, one of them worth £33 million. Why hasn't those properties been seized and confiscated by this government? Why are their assets not seized and confiscated? So you either have to think that look, at the end of the day, and I know I've said this before, but I'm going to just mention it one more time. Britain was behind the revolution in 1979. There's no question about it, and it was a left-wing government at the time. And we even have currently the BBC going to Iran and saying, this is a family festival. One of the reporters from the BBC went to Iran and said this is a family festival. After 50,000 people had died, the Islamic Republic was celebrating their anniversary of the 47th year they were charged. And BBC reporters went inside the country and called it a family festival. Like, this is not journalism. And I really hope Donald Trump wins his lawsuit against the BBC of 5 zillion. I really do, because they're faking, they have been responsible for a lot of evil in the world by spreading this information, even up to this point, backing the Islamic Republic, saying all these protests were because of economics. So we have to defeat the woke virus. You have to defeat the Labour Party and the Green Party and institutions like the BBC that's spreading this information, which will come back and bite the United Kingdom.
Well, there's been widespread suppositions that the BBC or the UK had something to do with facilitating the rise of the mullahs, but we've never been able to substantiate that. I know that there's widespread thought within Iran that the BBC has taken the Ayatollah's line, and I will say there was reports when the country opened up slightly after these protests were brutally slapped down with the potential murder of up to 30,000 Iranians, that the BBC was allowed in, and they were reporting on a pro-regime protest. And I would have thought that a broadcaster that reports to care about human rights and the strategic interests of the British people would not be parroting the regime's line.
Yeah, and that's why we call them Ayatollah BBC in Iran, because, as I said, they had a big hand in the revolution back in 1979. But let's not forget, the Islamic Republic will not let you in unless you do a positive report on them. They're not going to invite BBC reporters to say, look, we need, the Islamic Republic killed 50,000 people. Of course, they're not going to say that. And you also had this other reporter by the name of Bushra Sheikh that went to the Islamic Republic and said, I've been walking down the street without the hijab. This is all the Mossad operation. Islamic Republic is fighting for Iran's sovereignty. It's all the Zionists that want Iranian land. Like a basic understanding of geography you would know that Israel is on the other side of the map. Like they're thousands of miles away. They can't want Persian land. So I want Iran, and this is the thing, that the Islamic Republic is the occupying force in the region. They have occupied our country. And this is what people don't realize. If Iran is free, it would be better for the Palestinians. It's going to be better for the Palestinians if the Islamic Republic of Iran collapses. Why? Because they're the ones funding Hamas, Hezbollah, Houthis, which attack Israel, which then leads to Israel retaliating. So when you remove this cancerous cell, it will be better for everyone, not just for Israelis, but also for Palestinians.
Yes, but Younes, I have a sneaky suspicion that the left don't actually care about the Palestinians. They just hate the West that much and Israel that much. So,
Yeah,
but
it
we'll
won't
be
go.
able to expose that. I think there's definitely, as what you've just said there's definitely questions for Keir Starmer, for the BBC, for the British state. I mean, they were so slow, I would said deafening silence in January to the protests. I don't think Keir Starmer really moved to say anything until Trump said that he wanted to go in. And then obviously we originally denied the US the ability to strike from Diego Garcia. And now we've rode it back after the Cyprus attack.
Right.
And I just, when you first living in the UK, did you ever think that that would be the position of the British government? Did you think it would be us that stood alone in support of the Iranian regime?
Well, sometimes you wish for Tony Blair back because that's Tony Blair at least had a backbone. Keir Starmer is just an absolute joke and an imbecile. And look, he's harming UK's interests. Forget about Iran for a second. Now forget about the Islamic Republic. The Islamic Republic has been funding through Qatari funds. You're hijacking your institutions. I was outside debating with students, and they are all radicalized. They are pro-Islamic Republic, pro-Hamas. How has this happened? This has happened like Qatari-funded institutions that indoctrinate your children. These same children are going to be decision makers in 10, 20, 30 years' time. And they're going to literally hand your country to the Islamists. And then when you have someone coming and questioning this, they'll label them Islamophobic, racist, xenophobic. And unfortunately, Keir Starmer, he's not a leader. Like every time we watch him speak, you can see every single line has been rehearsed. And he's trying not to upset anyone. And he's trying to make everyone happy. But by trying to do that, he's making no one happy. To the point that the Muslims in this country hate Labour Party. They're going for the Greens now, So Keir Starmer is going to go down as one of the worst prime ministers in history because what he's doing now will damage this country and is already damaging this country. You're losing your identity to pander to Islamists, okay? And you can see that in the elections that Reform lost with to the Greens. And a lot of Labour supporters are now moving to the Greens and they're supporting the Greens, and they are even worse than Labour. So I really worry for this country. I really do. And I think it's weak leaders like Keir Starmer that will lead us in that direction. If the UK is not safe, within the next 5 years, this country is done. As the JD Vance joke, the next Islamic state to have a nuclear power is the United Kingdom. It's going to be a reality in 5 years' time. Don't think it can't happen to you. You need to overturn this cycle. And unfortunately, Keir Starmer are a catalyst to that wrong side of history.
Thank you so much for talking to us, and we'll talk to you again as the war starts to develop.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.